Chapters 342 to 343. Is the crystal user still as sullen as the newfound Uzumaki is eager? Ringo asked Rei, as she longingly snuggled to his side on the couch in the living room, with an expression of pure bliss. She just returned back home to their mansion in the village on the other side after a particularly long week spent solely in Kirigakure in preparation for the Chunin exams in Konoha, and the events happening during or after them. It was honestly maddening, and choosing teams for the exams was actually the easiest part of it all. Her only solace was that when her gaze fell on Pakura, who was currently using the other side of highly amused Rei as a teddy bear, the green-haired woman gave her a weak but understanding smile. Tsunagakure was in full mobilization too, and keeping these things secret, while a lot easier thanks to Rei's village-scale barrier seals, still needed a massive effort. Spies were routed, the village's forges running all day and night long, troops organized and prepared, defense and offense restructured, assassins fully notified that orders might come any second, and they will be required to don their masks. The 7 swordsmen were having more and more sparring sessions in the last-minute rush for improvement. Finances had to be sorted, budget secured, all non-vital projects put on hold, and War Council was put together, starting to strategize and evaluate the earliest elimination targets for assassins while making first plans for Kirigakure's offensive and fortifications, plans that will have to be no doubt adjusted once Konoha and Tsunagakure really tie the proverbial knot with them. The clan heads were also informed what would happen shortly after the Konoha Chunin exams. To deal with their own problems and make their own war preparations for the village was fully expecting the clan ninjas to pull their weight. This all meant paperwork. Yeah, paperwork. That blasted thing. Ringo would never have guessed that putting the village on war footing would require so much damn paperwork. Her reaction? Fuck my life. There was no nicer way to put it when she saw the unending stacks of paper on her table, around her table, all over her damn office. At least this nightmarish week was finally over. Her wrist hurt more than lifelong intense practice with sword, and it is paperwork that made her wrist kill her with pain. That made the hardened kunoichi in Ringo quite vexed. It was a time like this that Ringo pitied the third Mizukage and fully understood why the man was so stressed. It was hard enough to make the village work with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine when everyone... Ringo really didn't want to imagine the mess it would be if she had to rule over unruly clan heads with their own agendas. That simply didn't fly during her reign, much less when the village was on the precipice of war. A soft snort resounded from the door leading to the kitchen, causing Ringo to slightly turn her head towards it and notice a pale-skinned woman with horns leaving the kitchen, carrying 2 plates. That crystal girl didn't speak a word since Rei made her sign the contract. "It has been weeks." Kaguya chuckled, finally reaching the armchair opposite the sofa on which Rei, Ringo, and Pakura were seated. "True." Rei distractedly agreed, not taking off his gaze from the seals he was trying to put together. "Gorin isn't happy she was left on the moon. As if you would let her back onto Earth. It is blatantly obvious she would try to run away and inform..." Pakura tiredly sighed, enjoying Rei's warmth. Ringo tried to reach for the food on the plates Kaguya brought and put on the table, but before she could grab herself a bite, Kaguya quickly took both plates again into her hands and pulled them away with a mild glare aimed at the stupefied Ringo. "And the Uzumaki half-breed fit right into this clan of red-headed bastards." Kaguya spoke, her pointed and warning look not leaving Ringo as she cradled her food. Her eyes now flickered over Ringo's red hair as a pondering frown appeared on her face. Ringo just rolled her eyes and returned to her snuggling with Rei, while inwardly cursing white-haired, stingy alien bitches with freaky eyes. Kaguya was not fond of the Uzumaki clan. Her descendants or not, Anyone who practiced seals was on her shit list except Rei because he actually offered her help. Despite that, Kaguya did not fully trust Rei. Only when he pulled out his newest product, the contracting seal, did Kaguya finally get the necessary reassurance. The contract seal was something that enforced terms stated on a contract. It worked on the soul rather than the body, and while ninjas had sturdy souls, that didn't mean breaking it wouldn't be nasty. In fact, just the attempt to do so would be excruciating. Rei used it on both Gurren and Tayuya as the unwitting test subjects, and Kaguya instantly understood what purpose the contract held. And unsurprisingly, it was the very same day that Rei came back to her seal to seal the deal. They signed a contract where Rei had to free her, and she would become his. With that, Kaguya was assured Rei would really put effort into fulfilling his part of the deal. What this his meant, neither Rei nor Kaguya. It could be anything from subordinate to lover, and both were fine with leaving it so open. For now. Fortunately for Kaguya, this safeguard of the contract meant Rei decided it was fine to give her more freedom. The current body of Kaguya was but a special shadow clone with a multitude of seals all over it that prevented her from instantly dispelling due to accidental light damage. That's why Kaguya had only as much chakra available to her as the clone, which meant she felt. Alas, she would rather feel vulnerable but capable of eating the incredible foods found in Rei's fridge than be stuck in the seal. The occasional cuddles with Rei helped too, but it was not all just a walk in the park. Kaguya was extremely envious of Tsunade freaking Senju, who decided it was her job to goad her by visiting Rei's chambers every damn night. While being extremely loud, any attempt to relieve her frustrations. In the end, it was just a large concentration of chakra. She felt cheated. Tayuya is a very talented kid. Rei smiled, ignoring the slightly hostile tone of Kaguya. In the past few weeks, she took to her studies like a fish to water. She is no longer restricted to only doing illusions through her chakra-infused sounds. Echolocation? Ringo raised her eyebrow. Yup, it was the first thing that was taught to her. Echolocation was a quite basic sensing technique Rei and Konan invented during their youth. They did not use it much, not after they surpassed a certain limit in their power and devised better ways. The reason why Ringo was aware of it was that she had to spend 2 damned months practicing it to perfection when she was Jainin, only to find out it was mostly useless for her when she was finished. Sometimes she just had to hate the tough love of her definitely not. And with the girl's affinity for sounds, she learned it in a day. Rei nonchalantly added, eagerly watching Ringo's reaction with the corner of his eye. He was not left disappointed. Ringo's face scrunched as if she ate a particularly nasty lemon. "One day?" She cursed Tayuya in her head. "The bitch just earned herself a particularly high position on my shit list." She disgruntledly decided. Were her 2 months of suffering so meaningless? Yeah. A new voice suddenly interjected as Tsunade leisurely walked in, stretching like a cat. Rei just had to explain certain concepts to the girl, and she found out how to create shockwaves via her sound all by herself. She shook her head in disbelieving amusement. The girl has potential to reach SS rank. SS rank? Ringo's jaw dropped. In the village on the other side, S ranks were not rare. After that came SS ranks, and after them SSS rank, which was basically just Rei and his girls. To hear that the weak, low Jonin-level girl who loved to cuss had the natural talent to reach SS rank was mind-boggling for Ringo. To be fair, even Konan and Tsunade reacted in much the same way as Ringo when they first realized this fact. They just had enough time to come to terms with it. I can't help but find it funny. Orochimaru has no idea what a gem that girl is. Tsunade He made her train in genjutsu when she could possibly use the very same amount of chakra to blast through chakra-reinforced walls as she would for a mid-class illusion. Her shockwaves are just pure bullshit, I tell you. She disgruntledly huffed at the last part, making Ringo extremely curious about the reason for her mild agitation. It works on a very similar principle as... Ray hinted at the reason for Tsunade's displeasure. And our resident Mednian is still mad that a wet-behind-her-ears girl managed to recreate the effects of her super strength through sound waves and can use it as a ranged attack. Tsunade rolled her eyes as she arrived behind Ray and eagerly put her hands on his shoulders, starting to massage him. She could instantly feel the surge of his water-natured chakra entering her system. She loved to give her beloved a proper massage. With his long working hours on seals, he always had stiff shoulders. That Ray made it his duty to make the massage as pleasurable for Tsunade as it was for him. That only made it that much sweeter for Tsunade. I am not mad. The girl's jutsu is a version of my super strength that took me years of research, study of the body, and physical training to develop. Nor am I mad she figured out how to use it to a great effect in under Tsunade nonchalantly said, but nobody in the room believed the bullshit she just spewed. I, however, am not sure I like the way she looked at Ray after he introduced her to these concepts of how sound works. She looked a bit too love-struck for my tastes. Scratch that. The bitch just earned herself the top position on my shit list. Ringo's eyebrow twitched. You are... Conan also entered the room, and with that, the gathering was finished, as May was currently too busy being May. I, for one, like the overeager, vulgar girl. She is precious. And that is why you put her into Izumi's hands? I thought you wanted to traumatize her for life. Kaguya snickered, and Conan gave her a pointed look as she flopped into an armchair near the sofa. Ouch. Maybe I should lower her ranking on my Ringo mentally hummed, feeling a sudden pity for the poor Tayuya. Izumi is not that bad. Conan exasperatedly defended with a peeved expression. She trained the girl herself. There was nothing wrong with her. Are we speaking of the girl who thinks using Tsukuyomi torture for mental training is a totally acceptable training method? Pakura decided to butt in. You mean the girl whose idea of training our troops is having them fight against her fully formed Susanoo? The Uchihas literally avoid her and call her the second coming of Madara because of her sadistic nature. Ringo added her own 50 cents in deadpan. Kaguya just munched on her cookies, each bite transmitting her utter disbelief at what she just heard Conan say. Silence momentarily ensued in the room, and Conan frowned. She still couldn't understand where the problem was. Izumi was such a gentle and... It wasn't as if she used different training than she put Ringo and May through, and they turned out just fine. Ahem, anyway. Ray decided to change the topic. Let's start the meeting. You can bicker about your apprentice's questionable tendencies later on. He liked the girl, but he was not about to discuss Izumi's unreasonable training methods born. He didn't want to be forced to admit into Conan's face that having Chunins fight against fully formed Susanoo was a bit overkill, nor was sending their mangled bodies for a 2-week-long stay at the hospital despite the incredible medical advancements the village had. Well, at least there was not much his ninjas feared after that experience. Tsukuyomi for the win. We came together to discuss. Ray reminded his women and instantly noticed how the room quieted down as Pakura, Ringo, Tsunade, and Conan started looking at each other warily, measuring each other's reaction. They each had a village under their thumb, even Conan, who was sending a team from the village on the other side in the guise of Uzushi-Ogakure team, and apparently this Chunin exam was a prime opportunity for a gentlewomanly dick-measuring contest. Ray wryly smiled, and his eyes briefly met Kaguya's. They are really into it. He suddenly heard her unbothered voice through their mental connection as she munched on a sandwich. Well, they have quite high stakes in the event. Ray chuckled. He found it quite amusing. His wives, some of the strongest people in the elemental nations, couldn't settle their differences by fighting because it would cause too much collateral damage, and so they decided to simply use their village's teams for the Chunin exams. Bets? Kaguya cutely tilted her head. Yeah, foot massages, back rubs, a coupon that could be used to force the one who issued it to do your paperwork for you, stuff like that. Ray shrugged, not really caring. His wives did fight sometimes, but it was never serious. This betting was more to amuse themselves than an actual conflict in the house. Ray was actually more worried his wives would succumb to Tsunade's bad gambling habit. Even now, the woman still visited a casino at least once a month and utterly squandered her monthly gambling limit. If Ray wasn't so rich thanks to the Biri Company and the Uzushio Trading Company, he would be unable to even afford mashed potatoes with Tsunade as his wife. Sounds dumb, Kaguya deadpanned. She didn't see any point in betting on such insignificant events. It's just a game. Ray rolled his eyes at her. There was no real concept of gambling in her era. In fact, there were many things Kaguya simply did not understand, concepts that felt foreign to her, and sometimes even concepts she named differently after Ray explained what he meant. It was frankly an interesting clash of cultures. Ray had a perfect way to show Kaguya why this gambling was so interesting to his girls. Wouldn't you join if Conan's special cookies were one of the prices? Oh. Kaguya momentarily stopped eating and frowned, her lavender eyes slightly widening and gaining an interested glint for a second before they again turned into impassivity as she realized that, meh, I can get them for free anyway. She sent Ray a mental message that almost made him do a spit take. What a picture-perfect freeloader, he thought with a twitching eyebrow, not sending this to Kaguya through their connection. Suddenly, Ray noticed he and Kaguya were the center of attention from his 4 wives, who watched them with keen interest. What? He asked, feeling quite awkward from the undue attention. Well, you are having a silent conversation with Kaguya as if you were a long-married couple. We are just wondering if we should start teaching her some harsh realities of our sisterhood, Conan quipped, her eyes secretly giving Kaguya a pondering look. Ray knew that look well. He didn't even need to get a bad premonition. He instantly knew she was about to say something utterly embarrassing. Then again, our little stalker rabbit seems to learn well by observing, she jokingly added, hinting at all the time Kaguya used her mental connection to watch Ray's intimate moments with his girls. Kaguya became crimson red, silently averting her eyes and staying quiet while pretending she didn't hear Conan's teasing. She only slightly huffed and focused on munching on her carrot. And just like that, Conan again safeguarded her dominance. Ray thought in disbelief. With just a few words, Kaguya accepted her defeat. Ray was aware the rabbit goddess had yet no idea what that would mean for the future relationship dynamics, but he could already predict it. He saw the same thing happen with his other wives. What good was all that overwhelming power for Kaguya when a few words managed to cow her into, to her yet unknown, submission? Ray exasperatedly gave Conan a meaningful look. It was far too soon for these kinds of games when it came to Kaguya. Or was it? Ray had no idea. Maybe him thinking along those lines already meant that the time was just right. And wasn't that an incredible revelation for Ray? He indeed felt something for her. Did I really unknowingly develop an attachment to Kaguya? Ray furrowed his brows as his eyes subtly glanced at the white-haired woman. Only now did he realize that sharing a mental connection 24/7 might have had some unexpected consequences. Understanding the meaning behind Ray's look, Conan's lips mirthfully twitched before she turned back to the other girls. Well, since our esteemed freeloader is embarrassed enough, let's return to the original topic, shall we? I'd say my team will win the Chunin exams quite easily. I really have to thank you, Ringo, for bringing me the Uzumaki kid. Ringo blankly blinked, the gears in her mind slowly turning before her eyes widened as she understood what Conan meant. "Fuck you! You can't do that! That's basically cheating!" she incredulously protested. "Wait! You are seriously making Tayuya the part of your Genin team? That's ridiculous! The girl is almost low S rank with her sound shockwaves." Even Tsunade was exasperated. Conan smirked. "We are ninjas. We don't play fair. So what if I am going to send Karin, Kimimaro, and Tayuya?" she shamelessly said with a wide, innocent smile stretched on her lips that proclaimed to the world her victory. Ringo, Pakura, and Tsunade became instantly quiet, capable of only staring in deadpan at Conan. They had a hard time believing what the woman just uttered. "You do realize it is going to be the Chunin exams, don't you? It is meant for Genins," Tsunade exasperatedly pointed out. "They are still Genins according to the village ranks." Conan sincerely nodded and Tsunade's eye twitched. "Karin Uzumaki, the most talented Uzumaki of this generation who inherited not only Mind's Eye of Kagura, but also Uzumaki Chains and Uzumaki Healing Chakra. The second she meets Uzumaki Naruto..." Tsunade couldn't help but wince at that. The boy would surely annoy the hell out of Karin with her being an Uzumaki and whatnot, and while he was a beast with his Jinchuriki chakra cloak, Karin had her Uzumaki chains. "Rest in peace, I mean in peace, Naruto. At least Kimimaro is a level-headed one." "Oh, don't look at me like that," Conan exclaimed after she felt 5 sets of eyes boring into her. "You, Pakura, have no right to judge me for this. You might have forgotten, but I am the spy master here, and I am fully aware you intend to send your apprentice as part of the main Suna team. You are sending Tamari? She is one of your best INBU. How can you send her as a genin to these exams, you sand-eating bitch?" Ringo barely refrained from shouting in hysteria. She had high stakes in their little betting competition, but her sister wives seemed to be hell-bent on cheating. As Conan Senpai so nicely put it, she is technically still a genin in the village ranks. Pakura smugly shrugged. "Not my problem. Your head is filled only with forging and swords. You should have taken an apprentice too, fishhead." Ringo huffed and petulantly crossed her arms on her chest. At the time, it seemed such a good idea to decline, to think it would come to bite me in the ass. How are Haku, Chojuro, and Utakata supposed to win now? Frankly, Utakata should be already jonin with his current skills, and Haku was not far off either. Ringo thought they would be enough for a measly Chunin exam. Now she could only pray their opponents would slip in the middle of the match and fall on their faces, knocking themselves out. Quite improbable. Or was it? The gears in Ringo's head started turning, plans and schemes forming. If her sister wives want to cheat, then so be it. "You are planning to send all 3 Sabaku siblings as one team, aren't you?" Ray mirthfully asked Pakura, already knowing the answer. Now that was overkill if he ever saw one. "Well, if I want to beat Conan at her own game, I have to do my best to cheat my way through." Pakura smirked with satisfaction and snuggled closer to Ray again. Inwardly, she was not as reassured of her own victory. Conan really pulled all stops on shamelessness in this one, but Pakura liked to think her kids had a decent chance. They grew exponentially during these past years, and she would be damned if she didn't show them off. As she looked at the depressed Ringo, Tsunade couldn't help but feel a small measure of pity for her. The redhead was never one for scheming, but Tsunade didn't think this was where Ringo would bow out. Far from it. Ringo was too stubborn for that. "I am so glad I didn't bet on Team 7. Tsunade felt smug about her own ingenuity. Why bet on a team from her own village when she is fully aware of Conan's personality? She knew the blue net would play dirty from the start. She led the Biribiri Company alongside her for more than a decade now, and as they say, old habits die hard. For Tsunade, betting on Conan's team was an obvious choice. She was actually highly curious if she would still lose the bet anyway. no longer really caring for victory or loss.